And we're live on Facebook. All right, folks. Sorry for the few minutes of delay. My technical capacities have been far exceeded this morning. Claire Brown had a conflict this morning, is not able to join us, and we had a little trouble getting Facebook going, but glad that you were with us on Facebook or joining us on the webinar. As is always the case, this recording is going to be posted after on the website, so you can go to our website and you can join the conversation even watching it after by sending in questions by email that we can reach out to you and answer if there are questions that come up for you about this topic later on. We'd love to hear from you. I am watching Facebook, and Brad is watching Zoom for questions or comments this morning as we go along. And today the Clergy Chat is about back to school, and we welcome our Director of Youth and Family Ministries, Hope Westervelt, and our Director of Children's Ministries and Parish Engagement, Rachel Broughton. And we're going to talk about back to school in a particularly interesting and challenging year. So I think Brad's going to give us a welcome, but we are live and ready to go. So thanks for joining us this morning.
So yes, welcome. Thank you, Joe. Welcome to this live chat. I'm really excited about this one this morning. I am at my office at the church, where just behind me, which is why I've got my earbuds in, I'm hearing noises from our YMCA preschool at St. Paul's, and 2-year-olds having a good time outside. Hearing the sounds of children, at least being back in preschool this morning from my office, which is welcome. And Joe, do you want to offer us a quick prayer, and then I've got a couple other words to offer up.
Yeah, I'm glad to do that. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Oh God, in times of uncertainty, we trust that you are certain. And in times when we don't know what tomorrow holds, we trust that you hold tomorrow. Bless this conversation. Bless us as we think together about ways to be both faithful and to be peaceful in this upcoming school year. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Speaking of blessings, it really is a blessing to be at St. Paul's, where we just put such a high value on our ministry with children and youth and families, and are excited about this and know that this is a challenging time to stay connected, and hope that we're offering some relevant information and conversation and dialogue. We do that because we love our folks. We love those beyond our walls, of course, and that's why we're here. We really are, again, doing this out of that concern. And I want to say that we're really not today about giving, a specific, this is what you ought to do when it comes to children in school. We've got all ages of children as part of our parish and staff, and we make different decisions based on the particular needs of our families and the context which we're in. My context is later today and tomorrow, I'm starting to load my youngest for his second year of college. There are still questions and concerns about we have for even an adult child headed off to school. So that's my context. Others have different contexts, but it's not about any sort of one specific way in which we ought to address this, but really having a broad conversation about that. And as Joe mentioned, we've got Hope and Rachel who are here. They are incredibly important people that help make the St. Paul's staff the best church staff team around. And I'm excited to have them here really leading this conversation, and want to offer them just a couple of minutes to talk about who they are, their backgrounds, and what they do. And then I think, Rachel, I'm going to let you sort of launch us into where we're going with that. So Hope, why don't you start with introducing yourself, and then Rachel will kind of launch us into the discussion.
Yeah, so I'm Hope Westervelt. I'm the Director of Youth and Family Ministries at St. Paul's. And I've almost been at St. Paul's for 5 years, Facebook reminded me. So, and I love St. Paul's, I love the parish. In my job, I work with youth in 6th through 12th grade. And so we kind of, not only do we work on spiritual development, but We really work on building intentional community with each other, which I think is one of the most important parts of youth ministry. And then I also work with family ministry. So any big family event that happens at St. Paul's, that is what I do. So if you have any questions for either of those, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions. My background, I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and have 2 degrees in human development and family studies and in early childhood development. So that's my background.
Thank you, Hope. Keep the Roll Tide to yourself, although I know Rachel's going to offer that up too. So.
All right. Good morning. I'm Rachel Broughton. I'm the Director of Children's Ministries and Parish Engagement. I also attended the University of Alabama, and another Roll Tide. In secondary education, we always find it very interesting that I have a bachelor's in education for teenagers, and I work with the younger kids, and Hope has a bachelor in younger kids and works with the older kids. So it's really cool that we can bounce ideas off each other. But today, coming from a foster parent perspective, I've had some extra trauma training. I really wanted to share some of the things I'm realizing that I've learned and I've used are really relevant to everybody right now on the basis of trauma education. So before I launch into my whole spiel, I do want to point out that I'm going to talk about some behaviors that you might see that are trauma behaviors, and that you know your children and you know that what is normal for them and what is not. So just because I say something does not mean that it is a trauma behavior. These are just some things to look out for. We also talk about trauma in different ways. And just to get it out there, I think we have this big, heavy thing in our head for trauma. In the world of trauma, we talk about big T trauma and little t trauma sometimes. Big T trauma is what people think of as these big, huge events, traumatizing to anyone, that sometimes PTSD can come from. So if you're in a car accident and you don't want to get in cars anymore, that would be big T trauma. Today, I'm talking more about little t trauma. And this is more likely what you will see in cases like this, where just things are different and these little t traumas can build. So that's something that's traumatizing to you personally. So the little t trauma could be, in this case, if we're talking about going back to school, I'm a little sad that I can't hug my friends like I normally do. And I'm also uncomfortable wearing this mask, or I don't really understand this online learning platform, or my teachers seem stressed, or my parents seem stressed. And these little t traumas can build, and you might see some behaviors that you would not normally see in your kids. And it can be confusing. And how do you handle them? And some of them, I think we're really used to looking out for. We're used to looking out for signs of anxiety and depression, but it sometimes manifests in different ways. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that you could see. And this is all from Dr. Karen Purvis, who is the leading trauma expert for children. She developed TheraPlay at TCU, and she's just a fabulous resource. But some things that we kind of look out for that could be trauma being manifested in behavior are becoming easily angered. That's something that you might see in your kids if they're stressed out from all of this. That is the unspoken message behind that. Could be that I'm frustrated because I don't know how to express my feelings or needs. I'm exhausted and I need some rest. This is tiring. I don't feel like I'm in control because everything feels out of control. Those are things that can be expressed by just being a little testy. I think adults do that as well. I'm testy. It happens. And that lack of control can manifest in that way. Dr. Purvis also says that sometimes kids will be very reserved and want to be left alone because they're not sure how to cope with their surroundings, with their new normal. Everything is new, everything is scary. So that's something to watch out for, just kind of the wanting to regress and be to themselves more than usual. Many kids do this all the time because they want their alone space because we're humans, but this is just something to look out for. Sometimes we have kids that a trauma behavior manifests as aggression, trying to numb their own fear. Sometimes it's restless, constantly fidgety, more than normal. Staying alert. That's the unspoken message behind that. They're staying alert because there's not, their routine is different. We all are creatures of routine, and children especially. Sometimes kids can have sleep issues because of this. They're also staying alert. Their brain chemistry is on fight or flight. Now, all of this might sound a little extreme, and it might be. You might not see any of this, but those are just some things I wanted to put out there because I don't think we all flag those as, this is my child not feeling control. So going forward in this conversation, these are just some things that I wanted to put out there that we can look out for, that are results, their trauma behavior being manifested. Just wanted to put that out there first and foremost. And dealing with these, we want to meet our kids where they are emotionally. If you've ever read The Whole Brain Child, it talks about an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. And all humans, when we're in our downstairs brain, which is our primitive, I am upset. I cannot talk right now because I am upset. If you're going to connect with them and they're in that place, you can't start off with the logical response. You can't start off with, well, let's not be frustrated. I know it's different, but let's not be frustrated. You have to meet them where they are emotionally before you can start talking logically about solutions.
So Rachel, I would think that there's also probably a lot of excitement right now. I mean, kids get excited, and I particularly for what you said something earlier about, I miss my friends, but I can't hug my friends. And so these things may be things that sort of creep into behaviors that we see as school sort of moves on, because these initial days, children may be excited to be back, right? I mean, they may be something that we see that comes up, not necessarily the first day or two or a couple of days, but maybe something that creeps up in behaviors down the road.
Absolutely. And like I said, I don't think I can say it enough. I am not saying your child will experience trauma from this. It is just something to keep an eye out. And I'm using the word trauma, not necessarily, and little t trauma. These are little things that we can look out for and honor the kids' emotions, accept their feelings, and then address the behavior if needed.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm going to cut in for just a second here. I just took the video to the main page so that more folks could join. And so there are a few extra people joining us on Facebook now for the remainder of the conversation. Rachel, would you talk just go back and say sort of the last paragraph that you said about trauma to sort of bring those folks into the discussion where we've been so far about going back to school?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was saying, when we discuss trauma, sometimes we think of these big, scary things. We call them big T trauma, sometimes in the world of trauma, that are causing PTSD. They're traumatizing to everyone. So if you think a car crash, a plane crash, these are extreme things. In this conversation, we're talking little T trauma. These are things that can happen due to transitions, loss of control, loss of routine. These are little things that can build. One on its own is probably not a huge concern, but when they build up, you might see some behaviors such as aggression or becoming easily angered, fidgety, that are our children's way of saying things, or unspoken messages behind the behavior. Things like, I do not feel control in my life right now because things are different, and their brain is on fight or flight, even though they're safe. We know they're safe. They're on some level, especially our younger kids, might not quite feel safe all the time because things are so different.
I think, and Rachel, are there anything, I mean, there's some logical places that parents would go to support. I mean, obviously our own sense of who our children are and paying attention to the things that you've said, and also sort of being intentional about our response. Another obvious source would be finding folks who do this sort of thing for a living and help, again, gauging that based on what you're saying in regards to the level of trauma. But Are there other resources that we're aware of that we would want to encourage people to take a look at? I know we're going to get into a little bit about prayer and spiritual aspects of supporting that, but what sort of things might be something that we would offer up?
Do you mean as far as people to reach out to, or things you can do yourself?
A little of both. Yeah. I think both, however we want to tackle those.
Okay. Well, as far as things you can do yourself, Dr. Purvis talks about felt safety. And there are a lot of psychological principles you can get deep into that I'm not qualified to speak on. But on a very basic level, making sure your kids feel safe in a physical way, you're tapping into the same things you did when they were very small, when they were infants. It looks different when they're older, but you're doing the same sort of things. So something that we talk about in foster care really, but it's applicable here, is when you have an infant, you focus on things like eye contact. I have 2 teenagers. I can't sit there and say, let's look into each other's eyes. They will not do that. They will have a staring contest. Same brain chemistry is going on with that. I'm not going to say, let's have floor time, let's have tummy time, like I would with an infant, but I can say, let's lay on the floor together and play Legos. They're not going to let me like hug on them, but we can high five. We're still doing the same things that you already know how to do, that you've been doing their whole lives, to make them feel safe and loved. It's just as they get older, it might look a little different. So as far as at home, those are just some little things you can do, and remembering to tap into your own instincts. You already know how to do it. You've been doing it their whole lives. They might need a little backup right now. They might need to be reminded in a physical and emotional way how safe they are and how loved they are. As far as reaching out to others, there are some there's play therapy for kids if you're really wanting to look deeper into things, if you're seeing some significant behaviors, or if that just seems like a good fit for you. I know people are sometimes very scared of therapy for children. It looks really different than therapy for adults. It is not them sitting on a couch talking to a therapist. It is usually play-based. So I would love, if anybody wants to reach out to any of us, I have a list of people I can refer you to that Mother Claire helped us create. And I would love to do that. And there's also, reach out to your school counselors. Our school counselors have been fantastic. And I have not even met them in person, but in providing resources for our kids.
I was just thinking that. I mean, I'm sure that the schools have been preparing from everything from preparing the building to how traffic flow, how they'll do everything. But I just was thinking the same thing, that school counselors most certainly have been thinking about that. We've got a question on the Zoom chat that says, I struggle with how much to tell children about what's happening. I have a young teenager, so I want her to know what's happening, but I don't want to scare or create trauma, which is, I think that's a great question. Like Rachel said, I want her to feel safe, but also try to be honest with her. Any responses to that?
I think that's extremely difficult. It's really hard. And I've been doing some reading on it, and a lot of things say don't catastrophize. Try to convey the consequences without creating more fear. But unfortunately, there's not a list of ways to do that. There's not one way to do that. In trying to make sure they know this is serious, we do have to take it seriously, but I don't want you fearing for your life. I don't want you being scared all day, every day. And I would love it if one of you has a better response than that. That's great. But I do want to name that is something that I think a lot of us are struggling with.
Joe or Hope, do you guys have something to add to that?
Hope, you want to go ahead?
I think what Rachel said is great. With young teenagers and teenagers in general, you want to be honest. They know what's going on. They have information at their fingertips, which is scary at times because you don't always know if they're getting the correct information. So I think it's important to convey that correct information in a way that's appropriate, so that they are knowing what's going on, but they aren't catastrophizing that. So I think what Rachel said is exactly right, especially with teenagers.
Joe, how about you? You've got young kids who
Yeah, I
indulge
think
into this.
as is almost always the case, I think both of those are spot on, and I also think that knowing the personality of your child, your children, is just key. And so, for one of our children, a sort of conversation about exactly what's going on is really helpful. And for that child, she'll go to her room and write in her journal about how she's feeling about what's going on. And then it's just like, I mean, it's sort of like, wow, that's great. And for the other one of our children, there's a balance between being the gateway for information that's not going to be helpful for him, while also telling the truth. So I would lean toward telling the truth, and then I would also say, you know, if you know that your child just is not there for that conversation, or in this moment is not there for that conversation, then that's okay. And it's okay for us to hold that at that time, and to say, you know, this is a parenting decision where I'm deciding that I'm going to sort of keep some of this, the feeling that I'm feeling too, which is also a part of this conversation, right? Is like, I want to be rationalized with. I want somebody to tell me what's happening, and maybe we can make a plan. And when I try to export that to my kids, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm also feeling that. And all the parents that are watching are also feeling that sort of gravity. And yet we're having to make decisions both for ourselves and how to communicate that with kids. So I think that's really important too, is knowing that if our stuff is in the way and we're feeling tense in a particular moment, it's also really hard to make good decisions about what to turn outward and do.
Well, that's all really good. I know because I'm sure that we as adults know how constantly changing this has been. I mean, we at the church have had plans that we thought, oh, we'll do this, and we kind of set in plans, and things are always evolving and changing. So just acknowledging that, excuse me. But also what I was hearing you all, each of you say in that is also to look beyond the question to see what's there. That maybe just answering the question may not really, it will answer the question and get information, but it also, there may be other things behind the question in regards to what our children or we as adults may be feeling about things. And that those are just as important as sort of the specifics of the question that's being asked. Yeah.
And Brad, I think like a really kind of textbook example of that is a conversation in the car where one of the kids says, well, what's going to happen? Right. And I'm thinking, like, it's 2020. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Meteor, you know, who knows? Right. And the question that they're asking is, what are we having for lunch? Right. I mean, it's like, what's going to happen is like, are we going to eat lunch right now? Or are we going to eat at home? Like, I'm just sort of curious about what's happening next. Yeah. And so one clarifying question, like, I think the phrase I use as a parent most pre-2020 and now is, what do you mean? And when I'm on it and can ask that question, often it's like, I'm just curious about what we're having for lunch, which is a totally different conversation.
Right.
And I think that brings up a good point of watching out for information overload, answering that question with all these things that could or could not happen. I've been trying to watch out for when do I need to cut back a little bit, that you're getting too much information, that you're too just absorbed in this. Like things like watching TV shows that are 20, 25 years old and them saying, oh, they can't hug, they're going to get coronavirus, they shouldn't be shaking hands. That is kind of, I'm thinking at that point, maybe we need to step back a bit and not talk about it quite as much as we're talking about it. But at the same time, you do have to make sure they're being safe. So answering the question that's being asked and not the question you think they're asking, I think is important.
It's like the little boy asked his dad, where do I come from? And he freaked out, and he went and got all the books about, human sexuality and reproduction and all this. And he just, he was prepared, and he overloaded videos, books, everything. And he showed his son, and he says, looks at him and says, what do you mean? Johnny comes from Chicago. Where do I come from? So yeah. Joe, do we have any other questions at this point from our Facebook folks? Comments?
Now I'm unmuted. A comment from Facebook about how this conversation is really helpful, but no question from there at this point.
Okay. Okay. All right. Hope, did you want to weigh in on sort of some spiritual practices and things that we wanted to touch on, or anything else at this point?
Sure. Yeah, and people can hop in and add things as I talk. But yeah, so I think that this is obviously this is a unprecedented time, but I think it's a great time to kind of dive deeper into some spiritual practices with your family. This is a time where it's all kind of being done from home. So we want to kind of equip y'all with a couple ideas for ways that you can just do some really easy spiritual practices at home. I think one really easy thing to do is acknowledging God in the day-to-day. It's really easy to look at the negatives right now, but pointing out those little God moments in your day with your family and acknowledging the positives is something that's really easy to do, especially right now, and saying, like, look how pretty it is outside today. Like, that's a good thing today. Or, you did really good during that first hour of school online. Like, that was a really good thing. So just pointing out a lot of these positives, because I think it's really easy to get bogged down in the negatives right now. It's just, that is a spiritual practice, is acknowledging those positives, those God moments. I think something else that's easy to do, because right now we're looking for easy things. I know parents aren't looking for a book of curriculum to do at home. Another easy thing to do is blessing special days at home. We have a great resource with the Book of Common Prayer, and acknowledging these special days, the first day of school, blessing that day, blessing the birthdays and all these special days, and making that into a spiritual kind of day is something that is easy to do and makes it special and positive. You can do a prayer in the morning and a prayer at night on school nights. Have your kids pick a nightly prayer, a meal blessing, and that's their blessing. And they say that at night. It's, a wonderful way to remind kids that they are beloved children of God when you are blessing these special days. And instead of looking at a first day of school as, oh my gosh, like, oh, how are we going to do this? But saying, let's pray before we start this day. It's just a really good practice. I think daily examine, if just the daily prayerful reflection of your day, doing highs and lows, or whatever you want to call it, highs and lows, rose, thorn, thumbs up, thumb down. But acknowledging with your family, this is my positive of the day. Like, let's go around the table and talk about these positives. But let me also tell you my one negative, and let's talk about that, and let's pray about that. So acknowledging all of those things and talking about it as a family and praying about it as a family are great things to do together, and great spiritual practices as a family that are easy to do. If you have younger kids, you can look into the 5-finger prayer, which is awesome. The thumb is closest to you, so people closest to you. Index finger, you pray for those who teach, those who instruct, those who heal. The tallest finger is for leaders, those in authority. Your ring finger is your weakest finger, so you pray for those who are sick or most in need. And then your pinky, mine's a little crooked, but your pinky is your smallest finger, and it's your last one, so that's when you pray for yourself. So having those, visual prayers that you can do at home with younger families is a really great spiritual practice to do as well. And then there's just you can do breathing and meditation, which is awesome. I highly recommend the loving kindness meditation that you can adapt to being with children. Parents can lead it. You can play it on the computer. But it's a really great meditation to do with your family that you can just sit and really just think about, all of the good things. Let's push out the negative. So that's a great meditation to do with your children. And then creative expression. Writing in a journal, like Joe said, doing art, movement, and dance. Those are all spiritual practices and types of prayer to do at home. So those are all really great spiritual practices to do at home as well. Like I said, it's not opening and just reading through the Bible with your kids. It's not us sending you a curriculum to work through. Those aren't the only spiritual practices. There's a lot of things that you can do at home that can help make this back to school time that's really super stressful and overwhelming. You can build those into your life, and then hopefully those continue as this time goes on and then beyond that. So yeah, if anyone has anything to add to that.
You know, a couple years ago, and y'all know me, you know that I'm not like the most arts and crafts kind of person. And we were at Grace Point, and Harriet and I we were working with the senior session. And one of those sessions, we were going to have them make Anglican prayer beads. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know, this is like, if I were at camp, this is like please don't make me sit down and do an arts project. I mean, and so I was anxious about it. I was anxious that, you know, like, all right, this, you know, I've got to kind of pump myself up and do this. And that particular morning, there was sort of an issue in a girls' cabin. So all of the girls from the camp were kind of off doing something, and we just had the boys. So my anxiety even went further up. I was like, oh my gosh, they were so into it. They were so into it. And we can add this as a resource, Anglican. And one in particular, young man came up to me, and I saw these, and I'm like, tell me about this. What is it about this? Because it was new to him. He had never heard of what Anglican prayer beads are. And he talked a little bit about his own experience of being sort of on the spectrum, and opened up to me a little bit about that. And he talked about the tactile presence that he knew it was going to be helpful. He knew, and he said, and he called it, what were the spinner things? The spinner fidgets. So he called it a spiritual fidget, or a spiritual, and I don't know, you know, that was a couple of years ago. I don't know how that went for him, but for him, that sort of tactile thing, and that it connected to his spiritual life, and that it was something he was doing with people that he cared about and cared about him in that context. So there are a host of things that if we want to create maybe a resource for people that we could just sort of add to.
Yeah, you can find
Joe
out how to make them, and then if anyone doesn't want to make them and wants a set, reach out. I know I have extras on hand. Brad has extras on hand. I'm sure others do too. So
yeah, Joe and Rachel, I wanted to ask about. I'm looking up at our clock, but I wanted to ask about y'all's experience, and I'm wondering if it'll connect with folks who might be watching this now or later, about sort of the physical, as being in the house, sort of the physical, how has that impacted sort of traditions that are normal, like part of the everyday life of the family? And maybe I'm going down a rabbit hole that isn't there, but I just was wondering if sort of this being shut down in ways in which we are, and I know we've sort of ventured out in safe ways and try to do things, but has that changed sort of family practices, how you get that sit down time? You know, when I was growing up, it was dinner. You know, like everybody had to be at the dinner table. Didn't matter what was happening. That was the practice of my particular family. My mom sort of drove that, and that's where we talked about the things of the day. And I'm not saying that you know, that's people do a lot of different things, but I'm wondering if those sorts of things change just because of our lifestyle, and how have you all adapted to that? And is that coming into play at all as the kids prepare and stuff for school? Am I making any sense with that?
Yeah, I think for me at least, and I'm not sure if this is, I keep hearing people say we have more time for it, and we do, and we are at home. I'm having to be more aware of keeping up those traditions and keeping up those practices, because I'm not feeling that pressure of this is our together time, because every second is our together time. So normally I think, and my situation is a little unique, but I think normally I would be a little more on the ball with making sure we're doing things, because that is our together time and we have such busy days. I'm having to be more aware and make sure that I'm still doing those, because we are always together 24/7, and it's easy to let those things slip.
Joe, I see you nodding.
I think there's also the component of this conversation that sort of makes it the reason we're having the conversation right now is we're also headed from summer into fall or into the school year, in a way that summer just often is less structured anyway, and compounded by the fact that it's less structured and we've all been in the same space without nearly the opportunity to sort of spread out or go to camp or whatever it is. And I think that Hope's List there's so many good things on there. And I think that headed into this time, it would be so easy to think, I don't have time to do all that stuff. Like you just made me another list of things to do. Right. And I know for myself that I have more time now with my family than I did when I was going to the office 5 or 6 days a week. But our practices actually haven't changed that much, because our core practices have been rooted in things like the dinner table. We, from the time the kids were born, have not allowed devices at the dinner table, for ourselves, and now that's the rule for the kids as well. So that the examine questions, so we always ask at dinner, what was your favorite part of the day? What's one thing you learned, and what's something that was really hard? And we all, we go in a different order based on who says the table grace. Then the next person gets to say first, what they learned today. And so after we sort of fight over whose turn it is to say the grace and then whose turn it is to go first, we naturally build that in to our together time, because we're used to a time that's not quite so unstructured. And I think maintaining those practices is actually a really good way as we head into another time of who knows what's going to happen, right? We are schooling from home this year, for health reasons, particularly related to autoimmune disease. And so we made that decision some time ago. So we kind of know how that's going to go. And we are preparing to build some more structure back in terms of instructional time. And that also provides opportunities for things like kids still need PE, right? Or recess. I mean, they still need opportunities to move. And if it's a particularly stressful day, yoga is a great way to move in a way that connects you into your body, connects you into the earth. And that's something that if you can spare 10 minutes and do that as a family is also a grounding family spiritual practice. Sitting and breathing for 1 minute together. Like I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I'm aware that 1 minute is probably a big ask in terms of sitting quietly and breathing for a minute. But just sort of getting us into the habit of realizing that those themselves are practices that don't require sort of a 30-minute commitment that we weren't already making, but just being creative about how to build that into the structure or the sort of fluid structure that's going to attend this fall, I think is really doable and really important.
One of the questions that was always at our dinner table was, what trouble did Brad get into today? It was just sort of, there were 4 kids sitting around the table, and that was always like one of the ones.
And everybody got to chip in on that? Everybody said,
they all knew by that point, by the time I got home from school. Yeah.
Add that to staff meetings.
That's right.
I will say another great resource for parents to follow. If you have Instagram, Little Way Chapel is really great. And she just posted yesterday a 5-minute prayer with your family. So it's a couple resources just on her Instagram slide. And it was really cool. So if you are looking for just a good, easy resource, the Little Way Chapel on Instagram is great.
Cool. So yeah, we definitely are going to want to probably attach something in whatever way we do that for folks to pull up things.
So we will add a list of links and opportunities to the website. Right. When this video is posted, it'll be on the Clergy Chats part of the website that folks can access after the fact.
Yeah. So I want to acknowledge before we, within this hour, and I'm not sure what, I want to stay away from advice giving because everybody's context is quite different. But I do want to acknowledge sort of the unpredictability of what school year is going to look like. I mean, school didn't start and there was already places where, 10 people on the football team were positive with corona. So we had to, isolate them, shut down. But we know that we've had at least 2 schools in the city and the county that first day back, and they've already had to shut down for 2 days because of people being reported that positive to COVID and having to clean particular spaces. I don't think there was any mention of sort of further spread kind of thing, but it was about the space, physical space. And I just want to acknowledge that that we know families are, that unpredictability that we sort of spoke about before in all of this. And maybe that comes back around to Rachel, with sort of working through the small T traumas or the challenges that folks are having, and sort of kind of get to a place and then wham, it's like, does this feel like 2 steps back kind of thing that, I don't know if other folks have things more that they want to say to that, other than I just want to acknowledge it.
Right, that actually picks up really nicely on a question that just came in on Facebook. This is a hard transition time, especially for my upcoming middle school grandchild whose county is all virtual. He missed out on his first sleepaway camp and will be missing out in beginning band starting, and his choir is only on Zoom. This is hard on him, on his parents, and us. Any advice? I will jump right in on that and then pitch it to you all. And just to say that first of all, I think there's an awareness in that question that's really important, which is if it appears as though the adults sitting on this webinar have not experienced our own sort of what is going on kind of thing, that's because I guess it's just a good moment, right? I mean, that we all have that. Every one of us have that. So this is not sort of instructing parents who are neutral about how to deal with kids who have challenges about going back to school, because it's with all of us. And to answer the question more directly, I think one of the things that's been really helpful for me in the last couple of months, because I was having a really hard time about 2 months ago after we were about 3 months into what was supposed to be a 3-week thing. I was sitting on my deck, sort of looking out at the yard, and I distinctly remember the moment when I realized things will return to something like a routine again, right? I mean, which is not to say we know when, and it's not to say that everything should go back to the way it was, but it is to say that the sort of deep unsettling that comes along with the pandemic will not always be with us by the grace of God. And so I began to really think around Jesus's instruction in the Sermon on the Mount about not taking thought for tomorrow, because I think a really good way to understand that right now is that you shouldn't borrow anxiety from tomorrow. Not knowing what tomorrow means doesn't mean that we should bring all that anxiety to today and just not be able to live. But that borrowing peace from tomorrow is actually something that's really helpful for me right now. So just to think that this is a really hard time, and that we trust by grace that it won't always be this hard forever, is a great way of sort of importing some peace just by trusting that that COVID will subside, right? Like the Spanish flu did. I mean, there are still big questions in front of us, but that we can borrow the peace of knowing that not every day is going to be as hard as today is. Which again, I don't want to over rationalize, but I do just, that's peace for ourselves so that we can get into the space of saying to kids, okay, let's be together. Let's spend some time together.
I really appreciate that, John. And it's a question, I think, that probably, if we can say there are universal questions, I think this is something that everyone has got to feel at some level, and that we are a people of hope, that we're a people of hope and the resurrection. And I really appreciate our own bishop's most recent video that he put out to the diocese about recognizing that even in the midst of this, new things are being created, new wonderful things are being created, even in the present time, in the midst of this, and that we, the people of God, need people who can point to that and say, look at this, and that, for me, that's connected, Joe, with what you just said about borrowing hope and joyfulness and from the future, and recognizing that in the present time. Hope, Rachel, I don't know if you all have some response to that question from or comment.
It really thinks both of what you're saying kind of makes me think about the issue of there is no control over it. I think as adults and as kids, we're used to having more control over our lives than we do right now. And so are the kids. And bear with me, if you think about it, from the moment you're born, you have some control. It's part of attachment theory, and kids having that trust is the first year of your life. When you cry, most babies, when they cry, they get what they want. I would argue longer than the first year of your life, you're in control. So you have that attachment and that trust built. When things go off the rails and you don't feel like you have that control anymore, it can be really stressful and it can be worrying, and it is hard as adults sometimes because we also don't have control over this situation. And this is one of those that we do have to reinforce what Joe said about borrowing peace from tomorrow, but not that anxiety. Making sure that, I lost my train of thought, sorry. I'm on a million things. There's a great song about this for kids. It's called Do Not Worry by Ellie Holcomb, based on that same scripture, and it's really great. But making sure that we're modeling, especially for older kids, that we are also feeling that, and modeling good, solid ways to deal with it. How are we trusting God through this time? That there will be a time where we're through this, is something useful to think about. Sorry if that's a little rambling. My brain is all over the place.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
I think also just acknowledging that they're anxious. Anxiety is okay. And acknowledging that anxiety and listening to their problems and their worries, and validating that. And then, responding with kindness and with hopefulness to that. And also, it's okay to let your kids know, like, maybe not to the extent of like, here's my full anxiety, but saying, I have some worries too, but here's how we're going to go through this together, is also really great too.
So I'm saying we've got about 5 minutes left, and I just want a 30-second plug maybe, and then Joe, if there's some other comments or questions we've got from folks, want to take those up, and then Rachel, and hope y'all have any quick words of wrap up. But just 30 seconds to acknowledge having college students and sending those students off is has its own level of anxiety that is new for me now that all of ours are out of the house in that sense, and just acknowledging that letting go, and the wisdom that they hopefully will carry with them, and decisions that they will make around how they gather and things. And college looks so different. Oh my goodness. In 1 year, I mean, just in all sorts of facets of our life, but college is just like everything else. It is so different for, and from college to college. So just want to acknowledge that. And if folks have concerns or questions that they want to talk more about, certainly reach out to us. But it's certainly something that I'm in touch with right now. So are there other anything else from our folks who are watching, or comments? And so Joe, I'm seeing a no. Rachel, Hope, do you guys have any final words that you wanted to wrap up with? Things. And Joe as well.
I am going to comment on this thread, a link to our family check-in. We're just wanting to see where you're at, kind of gauge where you're at as a family, with worries, with how everything is, and see what we can do for you during this time. So I'm going to put that in the comment section, and if you will take a couple minutes just to fill that out for us, we would love to contact you and reach out. We're also just working on some really creative ways to do formation this fall, all of which at this point is virtually, but we're working on ways and taking a lot of your feedback to work on ways to do formation this fall for children, youth, and families. So be on the lookout for that.
So the only thing I think I would add is that, as Hope said earlier, and we're not interested in sort of loading up more to what it seems already a challenging way of living. And at the same time, I want to reinforce again how important and critical, obviously, we believe our spiritual lives are, and the spiritual lives of our community, and that journey, and that, like everything else, like lessons that are learned and skills that are developed in school and socialization in play and home, all of those take practice and attention. Our spiritual life does as well. And I want to encourage you to, as parents and as families, to maintain that and to be intentional about it in a way that feeds you and feeds your life, and to not set that aside. It is what will carry you through. And I think the wonderful comment that Joe read a minute ago from someone about, a sense of fear and hope, where we are. I mean, that's where, for us as followers of a God who loves us and created us out of love, that's where we're grounded, and that just is critically important. I think that's just, this is not a comment that would come as any surprise to people from church professionals, but offer it up because I love and we love this parish family and community, and those who are looking in, maybe aware, and out of our great concern for you, and that those practices are just as important. So, anyone else? Final words, Joe? Anybody?
Brad, I'm thinking as you say that one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible is when Jesus says, "Every scribe who's been trained for the kingdom of heaven brings out of the storehouse what is new and what is old." So we've heard today some just like great theory about child development and sort of what this means to go through a time of uncertainty. And at the same time, I'm reminded that our tradition was built on times of instability, that times of stability tend to make us think that we're okay on our own. And that these are really times when we can say things like, "Give us today our daily bread," in a way that really connects us with the riches of our tradition, and connects us with the people who would have prayed that, really not knowing what tomorrow was going to be like with any certainty. So I just, we're all available as resources to connect folks with the riches of our tradition in a way that has gotten people through for thousands of years.
Awesome. Rachel and Hope, thank you all so much. Thank you for this hour, but and the time it took to put this together. Appreciate you so much. Thank you for everybody who has watched live and who will watch later. Thank you for your patience with us and what we offer to you. And I know that we've mentioned several times that we'll attach resources. We'll do that. I say we. You guys know that I don't know what that would be. These three wonderful people will do that. So again, thank you both. And Joe, thank you for what you do. And we look forward to seeing folks with more of these chats and back in the community of life. Thank you all.